Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Follow us, likes, double tap. Now they control your life, Dopamine swipe.
Welcome back, everyone, to the 817 podcast. We've got an exciting interview today, rounding out our big three mayoral candidates. Deborah Peoples is going to be on with us.
Yes, I'm really excited. This is really great for us. I mean, for a podcast that just kind of started during the pandemic and wanted to talk about change and being a part of it, to be able to have three very powerful, influential leaders jump on and talk to us about their future. Super thankful. And now Deborah, really excited to see what she has to say.
But before we talk to Deborah, we have a couple stories, really just one story that was front page on the Sunday Star-Telegram, just about the housing surge that is happening in North Texas right now. And it especially focuses on a number of communities of homes in West Fort Worth that are being built. The Walsh builders. Is that the right name?
I'm flipping through it now.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident it's the Walsh community that are building nice homes. Like, they start at $450,000.
Yeah, they're swanky.
So
they're all white.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what we were talking about before we came on.
Are we past the white thing? Like, if you bought a new house, would you buy a black house? Are we over that? Or is that still a thing?
No, I mean, we wouldn't buy a... I mean, we live in a...
I guess what I'm saying is I'm getting, like, super exhausted of the amount of white brick houses.
We would never live in a cookie cutter home.
Yeah.
I think that's what you're asking, and that's just not
But,
us.
like, even in, like, Meadowbrook, though, it's like people are, like, painting their houses white and, like, making their roofs black. Like, everybody's doing it. And I'm like, I mean, I feel like we're on the back end of that trend.
Yeah, I don't know. Our house has been that way since like the 70s, and so maybe that's what the trend.
Oh, I guess your house is.
Yeah, maybe that's what the trend was.
I didn't realize. Yeah.
And that's the people doing it. But if you have tried to buy a house during the pandemic, you especially have seen how housing prices have surged. Like, even in the last 2 months, they've gone up close to 10% each month, and are expected to go up another like 10% by next year. I mean, we're really just in a boom right now, and we've seen Fort Worth neglect affordable housing before. We've seen them really recently neglect affordable housing in the West 7th area, and I feel like it's a problem that's going to come to a head pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to me, the boom. I mean, I mean, even just looking at what houses are selling in Meadowbrook and how fast it is. There's a couple things there that I think is interesting. It's just like when you scope out on Dallas Fort Worth, and if you just look at how Dallas has grown, where like if you really look who lives in the city of Dallas, the real potential is still in the South. Like the South is finally kind of picking up, but like just how big the North is, and then now how it goes all the way up to Frisco, and like that Denton piece, right? It's like Denton is our Frisco in a way, in the sense of like length. I don't think Denton is nearly as like bougie or like fancy or economic, but it's more of the college town because of UNT, but. And then all the development we're doing on the outside of Fort Worth. And then, you know, when we talk about the apartments that are being built everywhere, I wonder, we talk about the lack of homes because, one, people are staying in their homes and probably waiting later to sell because it's a pandemic and they're like, oh, I'm going to stay inside. How do I show my home? And like all this stuff, I think people are like, I'll just rather wait. So you have a shortage of selling. But then people want homes now. They don't want apartments because they're like, now I need space. So I really would like to know what is the vacant or non-vacant rate of apartments in Fort Worth right now, because those seem like they're going up really fast.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's my take. And then I think this year just having like, look at this data here. It's like more homes have been built in Dallas, Fort Worth area. 40,000. More homes have been built in Dallas-Fort Worth area, 40,000, than any other U.S. metro area in the past year. According to the data firm CoreLogic, the region is on pace for constructing another 40,000 homes in 2021. So the fact that we're growing and building homes, but yet it still feels like a shortage, it's just kind of crazy. And then they also show here, like you said, Fort Worth rose 9.8% in February compared to last month, and they're expecting another 9 to 10% raise in February 2022. So you even talk about, like, does people start getting pushed out? Because what's very confusing to me, and I don't know how you feel, is like the East and the South for us, and then even if you look at Arlington and Grand Prairie, a lot of that is very diverse and a lot of more like blue collar retail still compared to, you know, the outlets north of Fort Worth or the outlets north of Dallas. And I don't know, what is your kind of fear of this long term? I'm talking like
I mean
10 years, you know, what is...
I mean, we have to figure out how to grow equitably. And it's the issue that obviously, I mean, worldwide people deal with this. But if we're just looking at Fort Worth, like the South Side and Fairmount pushed out and displaced a really diverse neighborhood over the last decade. And I don't know if like the infrastructure is necessarily over here for that to happen again, but I would say historic Southside is probably a place that could be at risk of that just because of how close it is to those amenities, but with very cheap housing that obviously that really has to be redone. But that's a place where people could really quickly swoop in, buy low, do a bunch of work, sell high. I don't know if over here is necessarily where I see an issue with that happening. I do think that people will start to get priced out where this neighborhood was a really good like starter neighborhood for young families where you could find something in like the 175 to 225 range and it just like get going. But now I mean, starter over here is looking at like 250 now.
Yeah.
And that's going into maybe homes that still even need some work or aren't exactly perfect, but you'll make it work. But then we see these neighborhoods going up that start at $450K. Like that's not attainable for most young people.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. Yeah, I just think it's interesting because I don't know. I mean, I've been really after this story just looking at the Metroplex, just a map of it. And it's so crazy how far Denton, Frisco, McKinney are from the city of Fort Worth and Dallas. But yet, when I look at that area, is that going... I'm looking like 30 years from now, right? We're talking, Deborah Peoples' length of time in Fort Worth, right? Who's been here since she was a kid and seen it grow. For us, does that mean like I'm just looking at like Arlington, Grand Prairie, and Irving and like that area, houses are like 250 there. Yeah. And it's like, I'm like thinking like, why are people still going up and out and not staying in? Because that to me looks like where the opportunity to buy homes. But then is it because like it is very industrious feeling in a way that there's just like a lot of, I don't know, it just kind of feels old, outdated. I don't know. But so is one day like Dallas, Fort Worth just actually going to be all city? And it's just like, and people are just seeing it as, one day, I'm thinking of the movie The Matrix. It's just like a bunch of skylines and a bunch of factories and companies. Stops. And it never stops. And truly the suburbs is Louisville. Truly the suburbs is Flower Mound and Plano. And that's like where the first cities in Richardson, like that's when it starts. It's just, I don't know. That's the part that's really interesting is like, why are we going out when there's so many dope cities like neighborhoods in Arlington and Grand Prairie. If you told me I couldn't live in Fort Worth and I had to stay in DFW, I would be looking in Arlington, Grand Prairie, these areas that are still inside the city, hugged between the cities, rather than up and out.
Yeah, but that's where jobs are.
Yeah.
I mean, Alliance is where jobs are coming into. So,
yeah,
especially
booming.
if you're brand new coming into the area and know nothing about it, you're probably just going to find an apartment close to work.
Yeah, like Keller, Roanoke, Hazlitt. Yeah, and if you're coming to work and you're like, oh yeah, I'm living in Texas, I'm living in a big city, but then you get there and then you type in
Hazlitt.
Yeah, and then you realize, oh wow, that's really far away.
Yeah, I know a number of people that happened to.
Yeah. So, anyways, obviously we'll see how that continues. It's just really weird because people are looking for homes. One of my friends said something that was interesting. He said, I feel like the pandemic took a room of my house because now I correlate that room to work.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's interesting. But, others, now you're having people who go into homes and it's not like, where's the office is going to be a requirement.
Yeah.
So it's also interesting for, houses like that were born, that were like old, like ours, our neighborhoods, a lot of them weren't created to have that,
Yeah.
So, well, let's go ahead and get into Deborah Peoples, everybody. Let's get excited to talk to her. She has a long bio, so I'm going to try to break it down a little bit. But Deborah Peoples was born and raised during a time of great change for Fort Worth in America. Participating in the civil rights movement and peacefully marching for justice inspired Deborah to fight for what's right at an early age. And she wants to continue to fight as mayor of Fort Worth. Deborah got her Bachelor's of Science and a Master's of Business Administration from Texas Woman's University. Deborah's business credentials make her stand out as she has a long working career in AT&T and became a vice president before retiring there. She also is the chair of the Tarrant County Democratic Party and ran against Betsy Price and was one of her closest kind of, I guess, competitors at the time of running. She was one of the closest to maybe win against Betsy. So she's now running again with the hope to lead Fort Worth. So everyone, let's give a big round of applause for Deborah Peoples.
Fort Worth was always the big city for me. I grew up in West Texas, but went to school in Denton, Texas. So Fort Worth was always this big city, and we would come. I had friends who were in college with me from Fort Worth, and we would come to Fort Worth, and I was just always amazed. First time I had really seen a skyline was in Fort Worth and Dallas. And so after college, my sister went to Texas Tech Law School, took a job in Fort Worth. And after I graduated, I thought I was going to come and couch surf, and get my gap year after graduation, but it was not to be. And so I had to get a job. I went to work for the city of Fort Worth, Texas in 1975. And that really cemented my love of all things Fort Worth. I didn't stay at the city but a couple of years, but lived in Fort Worth when I was working until 1997. And then the company I worked in Dallas, and I would commute back and forth every day. The company started sending me around the country, which was a great learning experience for me, but I always knew I wanted to come back and live in Fort Worth. So when I retired in 2012, I came back and moved to the east side of Fort Worth, which by now had a very ominous and terrible reputation. But I was determined. I love the east side. I love this community. I wish you could see outside my house right now with everything that's blooming and green. And I moved to the east side despite all the dire warnings from everybody, and immediately set about doing what I do best, connecting with everybody in the community and the neighborhood and reacquainting myself. And then I ran for chair of the Tarrant County Democratic Party. So I know all parts Fort Worth, just like I know all parts Tarrant County, and really connected with residents and what their issues were and what their concerns were. And fast forward to today, I am running for mayor because I understand a lot of those concerns can be solved by local government and local participation. And so that's my Fort Worth story. Plus, I get to have lots of plants and good stuff on the east side.
Yeah, we're both Meadowbrook residents, so we love the east side as well. Yeah, it's so green over here right now. I feel like it's crazy. We came home from a trip recently, and it was like, oh wow, all the trees are in bloom. It's part of what we love about being over here.
No, we're a hidden gem in the city, but we shouldn't be a hidden gem. And that's what I tell everybody. We should not. We need to connect all these neighborhoods. There is so much to love here, but there's also things to love on the Southwest. I was on the north side for much of the day yesterday. I love the north side, the far north side. I mean, we have so much, these neighborhoods and sections of towns have so much to contribute. And it's really sad that there are underutilized and undervalued parts of the city. And that's what I want to change.
Yeah, we love that. So you've run for mayor before. How has this election been different? Obviously, with Mayor Price choosing not to run, there's that difference. But how has this felt different than previous campaigns?
Oh, it's the energy. It's really, I tell people all the time, people need to believe that change is possible. And I think when I ran in 2019, it was like struggling up, pushing a boulder up the hill. People kept saying, you can't do it. You're running against an 8-term incumbent. People don't want to do it. People are fearful. They don't want to get out to vote. They don't think that anything can change. And now we fast forward to 2021. The country was just suffering for the last 4 years. People were feeling the weight of all the division, of all the, hate politics. And I think November 2020 gave people this extraordinary sense of hope, but also buoyancy that their vote could make a difference. So here we are in 2021. I am talking to people who many did not vote before 20, and they're engaged. They want change. They believe that the change can happen and their vote matters. And so I will tell you, in 2019, I did a lot of persuasion. In 2020, I got a lot of people pushing me on and cheering me on.
Yeah, and I think, I would also assume that what made it a little different is also kind of national support, or after kind of George Floyd and the kind of the way you rallied everyone kind of together around that moment, it seemed like that also probably, can you kind of walk into kind of the support you're getting, not just in Fort Worth, but also the state and the country? Oh,
I would love to. So let me just tell you, my campaign has always been about bringing everybody together. And I love to tell this story about how my values were forged, and I didn't know they were even being forged. I grew up in Odessa, Texas, I told you, in a working class neighborhood, and it was Black and brown and white, and there were Jewish people in our community and Muslim people. I didn't even know the value of that. My neighbor next door was white. My neighbor across the street was Latinx. Another neighbor was Black. We were surrounded by multiculturalism. And I tell everybody, my two younger brothers that my mother raised, we're multiracial. And there were only two Black families in an all Mexican Catholic church. And so when I grew up respecting the values of everybody and all of the different races. My family was very engaged in civil rights, and I heard about how Jewish people marched with us, and Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner. I heard all those stories, and so I don't know how to live any other way than to have a very diverse group of people around me. And I will just tell you, so I have done a lot of work, and I have been there for many of the groups, LGBTQ, our Latinx, our Asian American and Pacific Island. So it has been wonderful to have so many people that I have worked for and worked with now coming on board. And so, Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson, who I have worked with on many different issues affecting many communities. It was so good to have her reach out and say, I am with you. What can I do? Senator Royce West, our candidate senator to be MJ Hager, all these people who are stepping up, and that I truly am humbled and grateful to receive their support, because it is important. And it is important because Fort Worth is depending on who's telling the tale, the 12th or 13th largest city in the United States of America. We matter, and we are of strategic importance to this country. And it is how we take this city forward that is of critical importance, not only to this state, but to this country. And to have those people recognizing and understanding that is humbling.
Yeah, that's incredible. And now your face is on a building in Fort Worth. That's exciting.
But let me tell you, this is about pay it forward. That young man, Juan Velasquez, is an extraordinary muralist and artist. And I have long admired his work. And I curated a show for the Arts Council a year ago. And I reached out to Juan because I thought his work was so extraordinary. And he could not do the show. He couldn't. Well, imagine my surprise. He never connected me with that show. I was fangirling all over him about that. But he had seen some of the work I had done in community and reached out to me and said, I want to do something because I love what you've done in all our communities, especially in the Brown community. And so in the first meeting, I was totally like fangirling. So yes, that was amazing. That was extraordinary. But that moment, I know he wanted it to be about me, but for me, it was about getting his work out into the world. And I just love it that people are calling him and acknowledging him as they should have all along.
That's amazing. So, I mean, there's really only a few weeks left until the vote, and early voting comes even faster than that. What are your priorities the last few weeks of campaigning? What does this final stretch look like?
Watch it. It's what it's always been. It's getting to the voters and getting to the residents of Fort Worth. And it's every vote every vote matters. And so I'm not going to stop reaching out and knocking on doors and talking to people and talking about issues. I mean, people need to know that they're going to have a leader who is not only going to listen to them, but who is going to pay attention to their issues. And for me, it is not about my agenda. It's about our agenda. And so everything that people bring to me, every issue they bring to me, even if it's just, there's trash in my yard that the city won't pick up, I write that down. I write that address down because the people have to believe in local government. And I think, this is what's happened over the last 4 years is that, and it's not just 4 years, but it's been longer than that, but people's trust in government has started to erode, and we've got to restore that trust. And so if I have to stand at a door and listen for 45 minutes, that is what I'm going to do because I value every resident. I value every citizen. And we need to talk. We need to be willing as leaders to listen and learn. And then what I come back and do is, I listen to everybody's issues. I put them all together in this big sausage making thing and say, okay, so what do we need to work on first? And hopefully our residents will start to see the impact of my positive election to mayor. So I want them to see that quickly.
Yeah. And I would love to know kind of how do you see kind of the future? What's your kind of vision for the future of Fort Worth in the sense of, I know we're the 12th, 13th biggest city. As we grow and have the potential to be in the top 10, we also have, these housing demands as we were seeing today, the electric grid debacle, and a lot of the things that I feel like, how do we get Fort Worth to be a place that is kind of nationally known, and people start seeing this as a place they might want to live, especially in a world where working from home and working wherever you can. How can we make Fort Worth a national spotlight for people? And what's your vision for Fort Worth moving forward?
Okay, so you just asked me, to tell my story, to tell my Fort Worth story. And so I'm going to turn it around and say, we have to start telling the Fort Worth story. And then I'm going to give you 3 issues that I think are going to really impact that. But, the first thing, and I tell this, I have a daughter with a PhD from Emory University in Atlanta. She also got her undergraduate degree from there. And I was talking one day and I said, Fort Worth is larger than Atlanta. And so this child texts me, she's in Michigan, and she texts me, and I'm talking like to you, and this thing comes up that says, really? Question mark, question mark, question mark. So I immediately type her back and say, Google it. And she comes back and says, my bad. So, this is my brilliant daughter who did not realize how big Fort Worth was and that we were bigger than Atlanta. But Atlanta has this reputation for being this tech savvy city that's friendly to African Americans and people of color. So everybody's rushing to Atlanta when that can be right here in Fort Worth, 942,000 people. But you're right. What we have to do some really key things right now. And number one is we got to start telling our story. We got to start telling about who Fort Worth is. But then we have to make Fort Worth this place that people are going to want to come. So you talked about housing. We are getting ready. We got to look at affordable housing. We got to look at all housing. Fort Worth is getting ready to come into a major housing crunch. And while I live in a single family home, and you probably live in a single family home, everybody can't afford those. So we've got to look at other housing options. We've got to look at, duplexes and fourplexes and apartments. But we also have to look at houses, nice houses, but that are less expensive. So we got to work on housing. The second thing we have to work on is on transportation. Every place in the world, and I know people like to say, don't make this my Dallas, don't make this my New York, don't make this my London, but big cities have great transportation systems. You can get around big cities a lot easier. And I had a fellow candidate who said, we love our trucks, don't take away our trucks. Well, the reality is we are growing so fast that we cannot build highways and roads fast enough. We can't. That is why we have this transportation gridlock. We have to have, multi-layered ways for public transportation for people to get around. Good cities have that. Fort Worth doesn't. And a city that doesn't have great transportation prospects cannot grow because people can't get from place to place. And then the other thing is we've got to bring good jobs here. I love to tell people that, we're whether people want to admit it or not. Okay, we're a working class city. I don't care whether you have a college degree. Many of our residents don't. We are a good working class city. And while we have all these other great things, but we need to have good paying jobs for our residents. We need to connect with the school system and say, these are the jobs we're working on bringing here. What are the classes you have that are preparing our students to take these jobs? And I don't care, there are going to be some college professors in there, but there are also going to be some welders and some plumbers and some painters. And we need to make sure that we are building the skill sets to take the jobs that are going to be available. And I'm not talking minimum wage jobs. I'm talking jobs that pay a living wage that are $15, $20, $25, $35 an hour. And that's how you create a good, robust, healthy economy. And I could talk for hours about this. We got to bring more businesses here, but we also have to support and celebrate the young entrepreneurs and the small businesses that are here. If we're not growing these homegrown businesses, we're dooming ourselves to failure. And I could talk lots, but number one, we got to sell our story. Number two, we got to build good transportation so that people can get to jobs. We have to grow jobs that pay a living wage, and we got to find housing that will accommodate all the people that are coming here. So those are just, I think I gave you top four, but those are just some of the top four. And then you didn't ask me, but I'm going to tell you, if you live on the east side, you understand that we have a growing homeless population. We have absolutely got to provide more services to ensure that we are addressing that problem. I, as an East Sider, I wax between being frustrated that the city chose to aggregate everybody on the East Side, but I also, as an East Sider, feel committed to solving that problem and doing something, because rather than pushing people out of sight, we need to be pushing people up and out of homelessness and working on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the idea of telling our Fort Worth story. And I feel like one step towards that was Channing Godfrey Peoples and Miss Juneteenth, just getting to be on a national stage for a little while, telling about Fort Worth.
Oh, there it comes. There it comes. I've ceased to be Deborah Peoples' candidate for mayor, and I've become Channing's mom, but I love it. Let me tell you, I love there are extraordinary Fort Worth residents. And for example, it's not just Channing, but I was out yesterday walking and I ran into this amazing young man, and we were talking and he said, "You don't represent me. You don't remember me, do you?" And I said, he's an adult now. And when I realized who it was Channing's classmate. But guess what? He doesn't live in Fort Worth. He lives in Arlington. And I want our residents to stay here. We have these extraordinary citizens that we've raised and they've gone to school here. And I want them to stay here. So yes, I'm trying to create a world where Channing and Whitney and Princeton and all of these Fort Worth residents who were born and raised here feel like that this is where they want to plant their flag. This is where they want to do business.
That's awesome. So whether it's in May or in a runoff election, if you're elected, first 100 days in office, what are those like top 2 or 3 things that you think are low hanging fruit that you want to go after?
Okay, so we're going to open this city up. So the first thing you can do is on boards and commissions. We're going to look at boards and commissions. If I hear one more person tell me that they've reached out to be on a board and commission, and the city has hundreds of them, okay, that where residents, they are led by residents of the city, and we use residents' inputs. And so many people feel like they have been shut out of that process. We need to really relook at that process. We also need to start rebuilding public trust and public safety. I get tired of telling people you can love the police, but still not always love their ways. My mom used to say, "I love you, but I don't love your ways." I had a brother who was a policeman. I had a sister who was a constable. So I'm very attuned to law enforcement and the value of it. But I think we have to go back and revisit it. We have, in many segments of our community, people have lost trust. So I've told the police, I'm telling I sit down and talk with them. We got to relook at public safety, and the status quo isn't working anymore. We need to offload them of things that are not in their purview. I mean, like mental health, things around domestic violence. There are a lot of things about nonviolent crimes that we don't always have to dispatch a policeman on. Let's review that. Let's offload them some of the things so they can get back to their core job, and that's providing public safety. And so let's make sure we're doing the things and then revisit, that whole issue. So I also want to talk about independent redistricting. That's coming up. They just had a presentation. We're getting ready to add 2 more districts. And so if you live in Meadowbrook, then you're probably in Kelly Allen Gray or Gina Bivens district. Okay. I live right across the freeway from you, and I'm in Carrie Moon's district. I would warrant that the three of us have much more in common than I do to my neighbors in far north Fort Worth, and you do to your neighbors in far southwest Fort Worth. These districts need to make sense. And that's what single member districts were all about, was creating communities of interest. And so that you would have a representative who would be able to work on your issues. And I tell everyone, I know that Carrie Moon's job is schizophrenic. He's representing homes that are in the multi-millions in far north Fort Worth. And then there are homes like mine that are in White Lake Hills and East Fort Worth. And, a lot of retired older residents in my neighborhood, and in far north Fort Worth, a lot of young, upwardly mobile folks. And so we just need to make government make sense to people.
That's a simple, easy way to put it. Make government make sense to people.
Yeah, and I think what I will love, we can close with kind of this question, and again, just thank you for your time. Is I think what I'm just learning so much is how powerful, how important, like, to grow a national city, it kind of takes, the arts. And, you talk about Juan, you talked about Channing, we can go on with our music scene and others. And then you kind of talked about jobs. And then you also kind of brought up equity around neighborhoods. And I think as a majority minority city, and of the, quote unquote, big four running for mayor, as the one sole representative of color representing a minority majority city, what are some things that you see that Fort Worth has to do to get over its disenfranchising of people of color to participate? I always talk about the entrepreneurs who have so much great exposure from the food places like Compatible Delights in front of the Dock, which, like, how are they don't have a restaurant on Southside Main? How do we not give these people the true opportunity to grow wealth? What is your take kind of there as someone who's been watching this for a long time?
Because we've got to make a concerted effort. I love the word deliberate. I mean, and I tell everybody, we have to, and if you look, a lot of our great legal opinions have used the word deliberate. With all deliberate speed, we have to be deliberate. We have to go out and make a concerted effort. When we say that every matters, that everybody should have equity and opportunity, we have to live that. We can't just say it. And so too often people say it and they don't do it. So, you talk about the restaurant and the Dock bookshop that I love. We need to be reaching out to these small businesses and saying, this is the city's role. What can we do to help you? I had last Tuesday, I talked with a bank about, all the PPE loans that are coming down. So many small businesses don't apply for them because they're afraid. They're like, I'm not big enough, or I don't know how to fill out the paperwork. I don't want to run afoul of the government. We need to be making sure, and we have a small business team with the city of Fort Worth, but we wait for people to come to us rather than us going out to people. We've got to be more proactive. We've got to be deliberate about this. It's not just small Black businesses, it's small brown businesses, small Asian businesses, it's small white businesses. But we need to understand that small businesses are the lifeblood of any city. Okay, let me tell you, we only have 2 Fortune 100 companies in Fort Worth. Dallas has 34. You know why? Because Dallas deliberately has gone out and marketed their diversity. They've gone out and marketed their strengths. Fort Worth needs to start doing that, but we need to own and celebrate our diversity. It's a good thing. It's a great thing. If you look in the world, you go to any, and I know some people don't care about traveling, but if you go to any major city, you go to London, you go to Paris, they're diverse and they're all connected by language just like we are. They don't see, they have their issues, but in America, we make a huge problem of saying you're a Black American, you're a brown American, American, you're an Asian American. We're all just Americans. And the sooner we start marketing that and not being so divisive and fighting over little pieces of the pie, we'll be a lot better.
Awesome. Well, there we have it. Thank you, Deborah, for joining us. And we're definitely getting everyone excited to go out and vote. How do people learn more about you, and just kind of how can they help you as it's the last couple days until early voting opens, and then May 1st? Okay,
so number one, let me give you the easy way, and then I'll tell you. But I'm Deborah Peoples for Mayor, DEBORAH Peoples, PEOPLES. FOR for Mayor, MAYOR.com. And so if you could find me on Facebook, I'm Deborah Whitlock Peoples on Facebook. You can find me, go to my website. But more importantly, if you see me out and about, and let me tell you, I'm an East Sider. This is where I live. This is where I shop. And so if you see me out and about, stop me. I'm probably going to stop you first, but I would love to answer questions. I believe in my neighborhood. I believe in this city. Listen, and if you have any doubts about the greatness of Fort Worth and the potential here, you need to talk to me. I am probably the best salesperson for this city that ever lived. And we're gonna do great things in Fort Worth when I am your mayor. And just know I am committed to equity. I am committed to growth. And yes, I want to be known as the arts mayor, but we're going to do a lot of other great things.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time, and best of luck down the stretch.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now you all know that I'm on the east side in White Lake Hills. You got to come see me, okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
all
absolutely.
Right.
Take care,
see you
Deborah.
later. Okay, bye-bye.
So there we have it, Deborah Peoples.
Yeah.
What a light of energy.
Yeah, she is so charismatic.
Yeah.
She's fun to talk to.
Yeah. If it honestly could have gone on another hour or so, and we just sat and listened and let her just probably tell stories.
Yeah.
What were some of your kind of highlights that really resonated with you?
Yeah, I think that the Maddie Parker type candidate has tried to frame both Anzeta and Deborah Peoples, but especially Peoples as a person who doesn't want businesses to come here. Yeah. I feel like that's been a lot of that side over the past really couple decades of Democrats are anti-business. And I think that it stands out so significantly how well she understands how Fort Worth needs to grow. Mm-hmm. And I think that was just something that really stood out to me, was that she's not just, the left-leaning candidate or the furthest left candidate that is going to come and try and solve all social justice woes, because that's not even a fair burden to put on her. But she is just such a well-rounded candidate, really well-rounded person who understands what it means to make Fort Worth, or make people understand that Fort Worth is bigger than Atlanta and San Francisco and all these other cities that have bigger reputations.
Yeah, no, I love that part. And and I think that's the reason why Fort Worth is the best kind of hidden gem city in the sense of ROI, from if you're going to invest your time as a small business owner, a landowner, someone who's looking to be at a place before it becomes, the boom before anyone else sees the boom.
Yeah.
Fort Worth is just combusting at the right time. And I think it comes one with there's two things that hit, I guess. One is that she's an East Side lady, and she talked about late 90s when she got here. So you just think about that, 20 plus years of being on on a side that's been disenfranchised from the story. So then I started thinking about, if we're going to get the East Side to be included in the experience of what it means to be a part of Fort Worth, that was a really appealing. The second big thing is, like, not only do you need to build a more inclusive community, because I even think, like, if you look at like East Side Austin, like they kind of had the similar kind of, like, once you bring in these parts, you also then amplify what else is also really important, is what she was talking about, is the arts.
Yeah.
And I think Austin, Texas would not be the tech hub, the growth hub, the place where high growing jobs are, without it being an eclectic place with the arts first.
Right.
And so that part to me was also appealing, how the curator of being aware of the arts, how she talked about Juan, and then how she talked about Channing, and then and as you just add that all in with her representation, that part really intrigues me on how the real magic of Fort Worth could really be lifted by someone who understands those two things.
Yeah. Well, and the piece that Austin has lost a lot of is that it became a place where those creators could no longer afford to live.
Yep.
And so that's Fort Worth has the artistic driven culture, but as we grow, and she mentioned housing, it's front page of the Star Telegram on Sunday, the potential housing crisis that could be coming. Artists are one of those groups of people that quickly get squeezed out.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important that any growth, especially that is built on the arts, includes making sure that those creators have sustainable ways of living and sustainable places to live in the city.
Yeah. Something that you kind of just registered there for me too is, I think what makes Fort Worth different than like an Austin, because that's the biggest fear of growing. I really personally don't enjoy Austin. Like I don't enjoy it at all.
Agreed.
But I think why I don't enjoy it, it's because it just got Coachella'd way too quickly, and you got a lot of people there who are no longer actually from there. And I think the difference between an Austin and a Fort Worth, and even a San Antonio, why I think Fort Worth and San Antonio can actually become better cities than Austin, it goes down to roots. And what I mean there is, like, we have so much historical roots of being the West, Texas, rodeo. No matter if a bunch of Californians show up, a bunch of people from anywhere start showing up, that culture is healthy. Where I don't think Austin had any of that. Like San Antonio has, the Alamo,
absolutely.
Mexico, that history. I would say, like, same with New Orleans, right? Like this, like when you are instilled with this like beautiful history, I think all these new movers and shakers, and there's so many people in Fort Worth. Oh, I'm afraid we're going to California our city, but our DNA is just so strong that I think that is that wouldn't be the case if we grew intentionally here in Fort Worth.
Yeah, which maybe that is a benefit of the kind of slower burn that we are going through right now, where it's not like, wow, Austin exploded. Like, that hasn't happened in Fort Worth. It's like every year you can look back and see, like, oh yeah, like there was significant growth, but it's not just like so apparent right in front of you.
Yeah. So no, and so what Deborah was talking about, I feel, seemed like she had a clearness of that, in the sense of bringing everyone together and being thoughtful of all people, the way she talked about the homeless community here in East Side, and how we're hiding them rather than, lifting them up. Those are real things. So no, I thought she was super great. And, I mean, I'm probably biased, but of the things I saw, to me, the best interview I've seen of her, even though it was with us. It just really was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I feel like she really shines on this like person to person environment. And so as she's knocking on doors and just trying to meet people face to face, I think that her personality and her just ability to show who she is really comes through.
Yeah, and I think when I look at where I have seen her before, it has been in places where I think she has had to be more intentional of who she's talking to. Like, this is a relatively progressive podcast that probably super links with her, right? We're from East Side. We kind of probably have similar political views. But if you're talking at a business chamber panel next week or whatever, the people who are listening there, is like, they might be afraid of the equity talk and all this stuff. So, I know, like, for instance, when she was on other podcasts or other panels, she'll kind of talk about, man, I could kind of be a Republican if if there was these kind of things. She'll kind of like loosen up and like kind of say, hey, I'm not that scary. So I think here she was able to be her full self, which is maybe why I love the interview so much. It was just like a true, she didn't have to play maybe politics with this interview, where maybe on a panel, you got to probably be a little bit more general.
Yeah. Another thing that stuck out to me, and even more relevant because of some news this week around the police chief getting to meet with Senator Cornyn and have conversation around what policing looks like, was like, we obviously know that the phrase defund the police has been used as a fear-mongering tactic to get people to think that Democrats or left-leaning people want to set your city on fire, which is obviously ridiculous. But we have two candidates in this mayoral election who have created and run ads of literally cities on fire.
Yeah.
So, like, we know that that's at play, but it's just so clear that our police chief, our senator, understand that police have been asked to do too much, and there need to be services to help narrow their focus and actually help people. And I feel like she articulated that really well. And I just think that her ability to communicate that and work with a new police chief could go a long way towards rebuilding trust, both in government and in creating a police force that actually works to serve and protect all people.
Yeah, no, that was really clear when you asked that 100-day question. It was up. There's some really quick things we can do here. And she also mentioned the other part, which is also in the paper, the redistricting piece, right? And something I was interested to ask, but didn't, was kind of how she felt about the independent council group to actually do the redistricting. Because as we know, Ann Zeta was the only one of city council to advocate for that, and everyone else said no, so she didn't get a second. I wonder what Deborah's thoughts are around that piece, because she was also very thoughtful on that.
I feel like I read somewhere that she would want to adopt all of the recommendations from the Race and Culture Task Force, which that was one of them. So, I mean, I think if she were in that council meeting with a say, she would have seconded, and there would have been a vote on it. I feel like this is a good transition into the news of the week. You already just sort of touched on it, but City Council on Tuesday, they talked about independent redistricting. Ann Zeta didn't get her second to her motion. And so we're moving forward with not independent redistricting. And I mean, this really just shows the weight of this election, not just for mayor, but for every single council seat, because we are either going to have someone in office who wants to match East Side residents together and have them work together under one banner, or we're going to end up with a further, I don't even know a good word to describe. Like, I'll just go with gerrymandered. Like, a further gerrymandered city where I am having to compete with a city councilor or for a city councilor's attention with somebody who has entirely different needs and priorities. And that doesn't lead to growth, and that doesn't lead to unity.
Yeah, I mean, what's kind of frustrating is this is what you make these race and culture task force. They make recommendations, and then you ignore the recommendations. It's like they told you that this is something they were open to.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, it was
happen.
always just lip service, and this kind of continues to prove that.
Yeah. But this is why this is such an important election. I mean, kind of context is if you're supporters of an independent group redistricting the area, like, understand one of the 8 people agreed with that. So like that one person's running for mayor. And and we also, if Deborah quoted on saying that, then like, all right, so now you got 2 people who are running for mayor who support an independent way to respectfully build up Fort Worth. Now, this is important because these redistricting is happening next year. So if it goes a different way and people don't take this into account, the mold of what Fort Worth is going to become in decades is playing out right now.
Yeah, well, and even more so than just like having the voice behind this in the seat of mayor is that all of the incumbents running were against it. Like, that means that if you are voting for one of those people, you're voting against an independent redistricting task force. So if that's something you're passionate about, you think that the city needs, that's a pretty big box to not be checked off by every single incumbent city councilor that is running again.
Yeah, and then if you also look at and let me break it into like basic terms, right? It's like if you're tired of party politics, Democrats, Republicans, this solves this, regardless what side you're on. Right?
Yeah.
Like this is what, and so like you are having. So when people say they're tired of party politics, then they should be pro an independent council,
right?
And so as probably an average Fort Worthian, you're probably tired of this politics shenanigans making your city tough to like believe in. And there's people actually out there being bigger than their party, trying to be thoughtful and like making this real. And so that's also what you're voting for. So that's important. And you know what? That is very hidden on a lot of the language that none of people I don't think realize this that goes on. I mean, even when I have conversations with other people, they have no idea about this, but they're more worried about taxes,
right?
Inefficient government, these things that are hiding all of this.
Things that most likely aren't going to change.
Yeah.
And regardless, realistically, there won't be significant change to these like banner things that people try and make you worried about. But the actual nuts and bolts of how the city operates, that is on the ballot. And I think that it just plays into status quo Fort Worth, which for people of privilege, like that has worked in favor, of us for a long time. But we are a majority city. Like, that is not how we become unified and move forward. And I think it's come into picture a lot recently how Fort Worth is still structured like a suburban government, and that works well for the status quo to continue maintaining that. And I mean, it came up this week in terms of Fort Worth Weekly had an article about Tarrant County not having a public defender's office. That's something that large cities and large counties have. And Tarrant County being the largest county in the country without one just sort of continues to play into this idea that Fort Worth has been good at maintaining its status quo and has almost just grown out, like it stumbled into its growth just
Yeah,
as a
absolutely.
byproduct of North Texas and having land here and Dallas. And
Yeah.
so this is like, do we want to take the reins of our growth, or do we want to continue just progressing the status quo of, maybe we crack top 10 biggest city sometime soon, and 1% of the U.S. actually knows that.
Yeah, and that's where, I don't think like it took any really talent. It's like, does it really take talent to coach the Golden State Warriors? I mean, when there's Steph Curry, KD, Draymond Green, like Fort Worth was already growing, so we all like bank our legacy. Well, hey, we're growing, the economy's going well in Fort Worth. I'm pretty confident you could have probably put in a lot of different people in those positions, and that would naturally happen. But what shows a difference between having an all-star who can play almost like a CEO of the city is like, right, what happened in Miami, where they were like, that's the difference from like, oh, like Miami was a cool place to live, to now like Miami's competing with Austin out of nowhere. And it's half the size of Fort Worth.
Yeah.
I mean, probably even a fourth. I don't know what's the population, but it can't be that big. And so Fort Worth talent should be based off how does someone get us into the national conversation to be, have more of an Austin moment, a more Miami moment. That takes more skill and talent and being proactive than just like, oh, yeah, we're just growing, 5% year over year. But that's because we live in the middle of a metroplex. Also growing faster than us, Frisco and Plano.
Yeah.
So, you know what? Like, we got to really second guess ourselves if we're coming, DFP and not DFW. And to do that, it's going to take someone to be more creative in the story. And that's what Deborah talked about. And I also thought was cool how she mentioned Denton and how she's from Denton. I actually think, when you look at the map where Frisco and Denton is, they're relatively kind of parallel, kind of right there. And I think about it as the Metroplex grows over the next 20, 30 years, like that whole Frisco, Denton, it's just going to be it's getting big. And so I think that was kind of cool also, just kind of seeing that growth as she, Denton was probably small town when she was growing up to now what it is today.
Yeah, when she was in school there.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and dive into our wins and losses. Let's start with losses and then we'll move to wins. So Jimmy, what's your loss?
My loss, we've talked recently about Texas lifting its eviction protection for renters, and we're just already really quickly starting to see stories of people getting notes on their door saying like, be out in 24 hours.
Yeah.
And I mean, things are moving the right direction with the economy, but we're still not anywhere near where we were before the pandemic started. People still need this protection. And it's really sad to see this cycle starting so fast of a lot of people with means or companies with means so quickly abandoning people.
Yeah. That's to me, it's very, very sticky because I mean, I would love to know. I don't know any landlords either. I wonder what that story's like on their end as well. Like, I think that seems like but I even think when you look at the story from earlier about the real estate in DFW and even around areas, investors taking up purchasing houses and homes, a lot of it's probably big core anyways.
I think the other piece is that Texas still has $1.3 billion in rent relief that they're just choosing to not pay out.
Yeah.
And that's where trust in government gets eroded, because you have the means to help somebody and you're just choosing to have software issues or create crappy software and make it difficult for people. So we have the means to help people, and Texas is just choosing not to.
Yeah. But you know where Texas is deciding to take action? This is my loss. This is a crazy story, and the reason why it's crazy is because it's about a 28-year-old named Seth Penley who attended to breach doors at a data center in Ashburn, Virginia, and to detonate an explosive in order to damage computer servers, which are supposedly believed to be used for federal government agencies, according to the FBI. Here's what's crazy. This guy is from Wichita Falls, Texas, which is like if you had to smell Donald Trump's armpit, it would probably smell like Wichita Falls. I know that because I live there and I'm from there. But what's crazy is this Seth guy gets on a blog, I forget what it was called, and he talks about basically blowing up this data center, which would kill tons of people. And he gets caught in Wichita Falls by the FBI, who plays as the people who give him the bombs and teach him how to use them. And that, one, is kudos FBI for saving people. But two, it just shows how crazy and sad the world is around hate speech, negative information, lack of economic opportunity. Plus, North Texas is symbolizing leaders as people a part of the Capitol riots, leaders of QAnon. North Texas is, if hate and Donald Trump and all that was the lead, we were the first follower, is right here in North Texas. And that's what that tells me. So that's a big loss.
Yeah, well, and the interaction happened in Fort Worth. Like the FBI met up with him in Fort Worth to make the exchange, and then they arrested him back home. Yeah, I mean, that's wild.
That is.
I will just say that if anybody is super willing to help you commit a massive crime like that, they're probably part of the FBI.
Yeah.
Like if that's your thing, like I would not trust anybody who's like, yeah, come meet me here. I'll give you bomb stuff and show you how to use it. If that's your thing, you're probably getting set up.
Yeah. And then you're posting it on mymilitia.com. Like, it's just like, like odds are that is probably, a site, made by the FBI.
Monitored at least.
To find people, who can't catch the hint. But anyways, let's go into wins. Go ahead with your win. You know what? I actually can go. What my win will be is talking about innovation. One of our most innovative companies here in Fort Worth, Lockheed Martin, really just, making an F-35 stealth fighter jet for the nation of Denmark. I thought that was just kind of cool, to just see global conversations with NATO happening again, especially when that was kind of also a debacle during the Trump administration. So one, it's just cool to see like Lockheed Martin and international attention helping. And then another one is another innovation story is Fort Worth invested $50 million. A company, I believe Crestline Investors invested in a company called Gigstream on April 7th, which is really cool. It's basically a Wi-Fi platform that allows larger entities to have its single kind of channel. Like if you look at your house, you build like this little, you get a Spectrum account or an AT&T, and it's this like little server that allows you to get your Wi-Fi and have, one or two channels. But how do you do that as a real estate organization, a corporate building? And so Gigstream's out of New York, and it allows for Wi-Fi to be kind of deployed at scale in multifamily properties or companies, and Fort Worth invested into it. So I think those are two innovative things that I saw happening that, I always want to highlight innovation in Fort Worth.
Nice. Yeah, sorry, I totally blanked on what my win was going to be.
Yeah, no worries.
The Tarrant County COVID dashboard since the start of the pandemic has rated the spread level as substantial. And honestly, like, I don't know what they use to quantify that. But they finally downgraded it to moderate. And that seems like a pretty significant thing, that despite all of the ebbs and flows of COVID over the summer, where we saw things die down a little bit, and then again in like early fall before the holidays when we saw things die down again a little bit, it always said substantial. Now it doesn't. So that means we're moving the right direction.
I feel like this was the first weekend where we're where I feel like the majority of people are like, it's go time. Like I'm going to my restaurant in person now. I'm going into bars. I'm doing my thing. I felt like this is kind of that weekend.
The switch flipped for a lot. It definitely seemed like we went out on South Main like early or late afternoon yesterday, and it was like, oh yeah, like things are going again.
Yeah, I mean, me and my wife, we went to like the Great American Shootout basketball game. Our nephew was playing basketball, but it was packed, and everyone was wearing their mask, but it was pretty sardines in there. Like it was, and so it was a first. But being someone who has his first vaccine, and you're 85% effective already with a first one, so I'm like, hey, come at me. I don't care. I'm ready to roll. So it was cool to be out and just feel comfortable being out.
Yeah.
Well, there you guys have it. This was an awesome episode. Man, Deborah Peoples is a light of joy. Realize we've had what we call the big three. We've had Maddie Parker. We've had Anzeta. We've now have had Deborah Peoples on the pod. Listen to them. Let's be at the panel on April 14th by the Chamber of Commerce. I think me and Jimmy are going to do something around that on our takes on that. This is, a positive for Fort Worth that we actually have a lot of relatively solid people who want to lead. And we also saw that in our city council, where we have had Dr. Jared Williams. And next week we're looking to have Jen Sardui. So a lot of great youthful leaders wanting to get involved. So this was just, I feel like a very positive episode. Economy's opening. Deborah was a light of joy. I really enjoyed this episode.
I did too. We'll see you next week.
Take care.
Follow us like double tap.